Hi, it's Maya here, and from April 1st to April 12th, I'm hosting the Classic SFF Readathon, which is all about reading books, science fiction and fantasy books written by women which were published before the year 2000. So I thought it would be a good idea to show you all the 100 books that I own in that category, since the reason that I started this readathon is because that I own so many of them. Because I have the Through the Ages challenge of reading books from different decades, I have arranged these by decade starting from the 90s. Let's start with the physical books from the 90s. First I have Beauty by Sherry S. Tepper, which says it is the winner of the Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel. And this one is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, but it is told in the form of journal entries, so it is a journal of beauty. And that is what drew me to it, apart from it being a fairy tale retelling, which I love. I also own Ammonite by Nicola Griffith, which is a science fiction story, and this one is about a planet where for some reason men can't survive and only women live on that planet, and a scientist, a woman, goes there to study the planet, I guess. And then I have another science fiction, and that is Doomsday Book by Connie Willis, which is the start of her time travel series. Actually, all of these authors I haven't read anything from before, so I am really looking forward to this. I think this one is like more serious, correct me if I'm wrong, and the second in the series, To Say Nothing of the Dog, is more like humorous. Then I have a couple of ebooks from the 90s. I have Black Sun Rising by C.S. Friedman, and this one is a science fiction horror mix. So there are humans who live on this different planet. There's something like a fog or something there that manifests people's fears. So there are a lot of these like gothic classic monsters, if I am getting the right idea, on this planet because people fear them. And there's like a cool gothic castle there. I read the sample chapter of this on Kindle and I really liked it and bought the whole book, but I haven't read it. If I remember right, this one started with a woman coming home to discover that her husband has done some sort of horrific ritual. Then I have another fairy tale retelling, and this is more horror-like. This is A Terrible Beauty by Nancy Baker, and this one is a Beauty and the Beast retelling where Beauty and the Beast are this vampire woman. And finally, from the 90s, I own Luck in the Shadows by Lynn Flew-Welling, which I think is about two spy men. One of them is in prison at the start of this first book, and the second busts him out, and the man who was in prison becomes his apprentice, so they are spies. And I think in the second book they become a couple. That's all I know. It's high fantasy, and it's in a world where bisexuality is the norm, like in Eileen Kushner's Riverside books. I think I'm not 100% sure. So that's all that I own from the 90s. I also thought I'd mention a couple of things that I have on my wish list, like at the top of my wish list. I have My Soul to Keep by Tananarive Due, and that one is about African immortals. I think it's about a woman who marries a man and discovers that he is one of those immortals. And then there's Crown Jewel by Sherwood Smith, which is a court intrigue fantasy, which I really enjoy. So now we're moving on to the 80s, and the two physical books from the 80s that I own are The Hero and the Crown by Robin McKinley, which I don't know a lot about. This is set in the same world as The Blue Sword, and it is this fantasy world. I wasn't a big fan of The Blue Sword, but I want to try this one out because people say that it is quite different. This one has a John Newbery Medal award on the cover, and this is a young adult book. And this has to be about the daughter of Damar's king, who has never been accepted as full royalty because her mother was a witch woman. And the other physical book that I have from the 80s is Lois McMaster Bujold's Cordelia's Honor. The first book in this, the bind-up, is from the 80s, and the second book is from the 90s. So the first book is called Shards of Honor, and the second book is called Barayar. Shards of Honor, I think, is the Hugo Award winner that says on the cover. No, Barayar is the Hugo Award winner for Best Science Fiction Novel of the Year. But anyway, this is in the Miles Vorkosigan series, which I haven't read at all. And this one tells about the mother of Miles Vorkosigan, who I think is the main character in most of the novels, but this one it tells about Cordelia Vorkosigan. And a lot of people I know have recently enjoyed these books, like Elizabeth from Books and Pieces and Wings from Wings and Ink, so I am getting that boost that want to read this. And I think the books are actually quite short, even though this bind-up looks so long. So that's a science fiction series, if I didn't say. Then I have a lot of ebooks from the 80s. The first of those is The Woman Who Loved the Moon and Other Stories by Elizabeth A. Lynn. I have read one book from Lynn before. It was a science fiction book. I can't remember the name now, but this one is a short story collection, and the title story has won the World Fantasy Award. That's all I know. Now we're moving on to my Barbara Hambley collection. I have 3 ebooks from Barbara Hambley, and I haven't read anything from her yet. I have Dragon's Bane, and this is the one that I bought first, and this is the first in the Winterland series. It's a fantasy series, and this one is definitely on my TBR. This one is the one that I really want to read right now, even though I've owned it for like 2 years, ever since Scott Lynch and Robin Hobb praised this author on a Worldcon 2017 panel. So this one is about a group of people tasked to kill a dragon, and 2 of them are a middle-aged couple, which I think is like a great choice for a fantasy book main characters that you don't often see. I think they're married and have kids. Jenny is a sorceress, and John, I might be getting these names wrong, is a scholar, and then there's also a crown prince joining them. So this one is definitely on my TBR. The other books by Barbara Hambley that I have are also started the series. This is Ladies of Mandrigan, and this is the first book in the Sun, Wolf and Starhawk series. I think the main characters, titular characters, are mercenaries, and Ladies of Mandrigan hire Sun, Wolf or Starhawk to help their village somehow, and the mercenary refuses, but I think the women of the village are like very persuasive about the matter. I don't know how. And the last series starter is the first in the James Asher series, and that is Those Who Hunt the Night. And this is like an urban fantasy historical vampire series. So the main character is a spy who gets tasked, I think by a vampire, to hunt down a vampire killer. From the 80s, I also have Dawn by Octavia Butler, and this is the first book in the Xenogenesis series. And in this one, I think Earth was destroyed, but aliens picked up some people and put them in stasis, and the main character is a woman who is awoken and sent back to live on Earth by the aliens. Then I have The Book of the Damned by Tanith Lee, and this one is the first book in the Secret Books of Paradise, and this is set in like a dark gothic version of Paris. It's I think more on the horror vein of things, but I really enjoyed Tanith Lee's Night's Master, so I picked this one up when it was on sale. And finally from the 80s, I own Sister Light, Sister Dark by Jane Yolen. I think this is a young adult fantasy book, the first in a series again. The series might be called Great Alta, and it's about this young woman who has been raised as a warrior, but she also has like this dark mirror twin sister who lives in the shadows. Then a few books from the 80s that I have on my wish list. I have War for the Oaks by Emma Bull, which is one of these classic urban fantasy books. Then there is Oathbound by Mercedes Lackey, which is like a sword and sorcery, but it has 2 women, this duo as the main characters. I think one of them is a warrior woman, the other one might be a healer or some sort of magic user. I also have The Steerswoman by Rosemary Kirsten, which I can't remember much about. Like the synopsis that I have read was quite confusing and raised more questions than it really answered. I have no idea, but a lot of people have enjoyed this book. Then I also have another Tanith Lee on my wishlist, which I think I've mentioned if you're interested in fairy tale retellings, because that has those, and it's Red as Blood or Tales from the Sisters Grimmer, and it has a bunch of fairy tales as retold by Tanith Lee. Let's move on to the 70s, and I have The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia A. McKillip, which is a World Fantasy Award winner, and this one tells about a wizard called Sibel, who lives in her stone abode, requires the company of no one, but is attended by these magical creatures, I guess the Forgotten Beasts of Eld. And there's one magical creature that eludes her, but she'd really like that creature. And I think something happens, someone arrives to disrupt her life. Another book that I have from the 70s is science fiction classic The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. And this one, I think someone has the power to make dreams a reality. Then I have 2 books on my wish list from the 70s. Another Tanith Lee, I have Death's Master, because I really liked Night's Master, which was this like dark fantasy horror thing told in a way that almost made it feel like a fairy tale. Like it had a lot of interlinked stories that were told in a very, very lovely way that I enjoyed. So Death's Master is the second in that series. And then I also have something called A Necklace of Fallen Stars, and the author is Beth Hillgartner. And this one is about a woman who escapes for some reason and travels the world as a storyteller and is joined by a minstrel, but they are also hunted by a sorcerer sent by her father to find her. Then books from some random decades I have Witch World by Andre Norton from the 60s, and this is the first book in the Witch World saga. And this one has a man who is from our world, but somehow transports into this world where there are witch women and gets entangled into this battle there. Maybe a battle between good and evil, I don't know. This one might be like a young adult book. I'm not 100% sure. Then I also own a book from the 1820s, and that one is The Last Man by Mary Shelley, and it tells about the last man on Earth. Then on my wishlist I have a book from the 1920s, and that is Claimed by Francis Stevens. And in this one a magical artifact is brought to, I think, 20s New Jersey, and a Greek god comes with it and wants the artifact back. This one might be more of a horror story or a horror fantasy thing. I checked and it actually says Lost Horror Classic of an Ancient God's Vengeance. And I also have one book from the 60s at the top of my wishlist, and that is Tash and the Chesters, which is about an orphan boy who is raised by court jesters. And this one I know about because Ellen Kushner tweeted about it. I think this is like a kid's book or a middle grade book. And Ellen Kushner liked it, and I love jesters, so that's why it's at the top of my wishlist. Okay, so those were the classic science fiction and fantasy books that I either own unread or that I have at the top of my wishlist. Let me know if you also want to read some of these, if you love some of these. Also let me know, and what do you have that you are most excited to read. And also, if you talk about the Classic SFF Readathon on Twitter, remember to use the hashtag ClassicSFFRat so that I see your tweets. But that's all from me for now, and I'll see you in my next video.